Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday. It is Wes McDonald here for another episode of Level Up Live. And I want to thank you for joining us once again. Remember, if you haven't been to the program before, it is every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. You can bank your wallet on it. And if you're in Central Time Zone, that's obviously 10 o'clock in the morning for you. And super excited today. One of the big topics that I love to talk about often is leadership. And we're so lucky in this day and age to have some experts that are taking leadership in new directions and challenging some of the status quo ideas that we might have had about leadership in the past. And given what we've all been through with this new sort of remote work lifestyle that all people are enjoying, with the influence of AI in the marketplace, with the pandemic, thank goodness, in the rearview mirror, that certainly leadership lessons have to change. And we're so excited this morning to bring in Wanda Wallace. She's an international speaker, an author of You Can't Know It All. We're going to talk about that book a little bit. She has her own podcast, Out of Your Comfort Zone, and she also works with Advancing Careers of Women. And so excited. Without further ado, I'm going to bring Wanda in now. Well, good morning, Wanda. How are you?
Hi, Wes. I'm doing great. And you, I hope, also.
Yeah, no complaints at all. Like we said in the preamble, I always love Wednesdays because I really look forward to doing this program. And as a host, I learn as much as the audience learns, as well, right? And one of the things I'll throw out there that we always love to do is find out where people are watching from. So anyone that does join in for this morning's session, let us know where you're watching from. And Wanda, to let you know, I'm actually joining in from Canada, and so I'm on Lake Erie, on the shores of Lake Erie, right across from Buffalo. And where are you joining us from today?
I'm in New York City.
Oh, it's one of my favorite cities. Absolutely love New York. My wife and I and my daughter were literally just there in the spring. And we did a little thing. We're big bagel fans. So every morning while we were there, we tested out different places that were rated really well for bagels. So never get sick of them. We actually took a couple dozen home from Hudson Bagels when we went across the Hudson River, and took about 24 bagels home with us as well. So thank you for joining us from New York. And yes. Kenneth Edmonds, our co-host, where are you joining us from?
I am still at home. This is going to be a record for me for a number of shows from at home, but next week I won't be here.
Yeah, and I'll say, and Wanda, if you don't know Ken very well, he actually has another business in which he and his wife do a travel program, and so they spend a lot of time on cruise ships. And Ken will oftentimes be in the Pacific Ocean somewhere beautiful, joining in as the host. So today we get to see him on terra firma.
Yes.
And looks like we've got a user coming in from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So a fellow Canadian. So thank you for joining us from there. Yeah, and super excited. Anyone else, make sure that you do let us know where you're watching from. And of course, leave your comments and questions. Those are always, let me put that in there, always welcome here as well. We will answer them and bring them up as we go through. If you're watching post live stream and you're actually catching us on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook, as we broadcast on all three platforms, we will answer those questions and get to your comments as if they were live, and we'll make sure that we get back to you for sure. So any comments and questions, give it there. And hey, listen, Wanda, nobody knows you better than yourself, so maybe you could do a brief introduction for our audience.
All right. So I like to describe myself as a reformed academic. I do have a PhD. I did work in a business school for a number of years. But I care a lot about the science. That matters, but I can care more about the practical application, because the science doesn't help us if it doesn't tell us what to do. And that's me in a nutshell, constantly driving for what does it mean we can do differently to be a better leader, to build stronger teams, to have better conversations. And I think that's where the action really is.
Yeah, I agree. And I did notice when I was looking through your website that it was really it was refreshing to see that when you talked about the kind of people that you worked with in organizations, it wasn't just the top leaders, right? That you worked with a diversity of, leadership throughout the organization. And it's interesting. It really resonated with me because I just recently did an interview with a gentleman from Australia. He's actually a professor and past military experience. And he said one of the big differences that he's seen, sort of happening from his perspective in the military, it's all top down, right? You get the general, kind of moving things down. Whereas in the business world, it's much more lateral. And I would say, especially now in the last probably 10 or 15 years, there's a lot of what people, I guess, call dotted lines, right? Where we have to interact with other folks. So, so important to do that.
Well,
And
I think it's actually deeper than that. And I think this is a
yeah,
really important point for what we're going to talk about today, too, because much of organizational life, especially the large organizations, is project work driven. So all the change initiatives, all the innovations, all the product launches are project driven, where no one reports to anybody else. And it's all a game of influence. So the whole story is, can I persuade other people to go in a direction I believe kind of their own will, as opposed to I can force them because I can hold their emotion against up against them. So that breadth is important.
yes. And it's interesting to bring that up because, I do a lot of projects myself as a consultant, as Ken. And I'm getting a little echo here, so I'm just going to check on microphones. Oh, looks like it's gone. Not sure what was happening there. Yeah, I do a lot of project-based stuff myself. And like you said, working with other people, those projects typically are not, on my own, right? Working with other people. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah.
And one of the things I want to talk about is actually the book that you wrote. Maybe you can talk our audience through that a little bit. And so you can't know it all. Now, I know a few people that think they do. So hopefully, I'll bet a lot of people send this book as gifts to people. And I got a couple of mine myself, so maybe you can tell us about it.
Please, I love it. If all you do is send the title, go ahead. That's great. And we might substitute with you can't do it all either, is the other thing. This book comes out of my observation, and I'm going to make a controversial statement right at the start. I think we should kill the idea that somebody can be a general manager. And by that, I mean, you can just have general concepts. Like if I have some general leadership skills, I don't need any depth of knowledge about the industry, about the function, about the products. I just use my leadership skills. That doesn't work today. We're in a knowledge economy. We have huge depth of knowledge that is really, really critical. And when you lead, you have to know some things. So the question is, where do I need to be able to drill deeply for the team that I'm leading? And when do I need to be able to span across or bridge across? So I'm talking about the depth of knowledge and the breadth of knowledge. And it's a bouncing back and forth between the two. And that changes everything about how you lead. So if I am drilling deeply, then I need to know how to challenge people, how to confront people, how to get to the bottom line and leaving people feeling really positive about that. And I'm going to lean into the facts and the figures and have a right answer, control the quality. When I'm trying to use the wisdom of breadth and I'm spanning across, I can't do those things. That's where the inspiration and the motivation and the strategic focus start to become an issue. But the secret is it's not one or the other. It's not that one happens early in your career and the other one later in your career. It's a constant balancing between the two, something many organizations call player coach. And that's the idea of the book. What's the difference between the two? How do you go from one to the other?
Well, I love that. And maybe we can actually drill a little deeper. And I'm curious, when we talk about spanning, right, if we decide that, there's something that we have to span for, can you give some examples of what that might look like in an organization?
Okay. For most leaders who have depth of knowledge, one of the big things for them is, like, let's say somebody's the head of internal audit. They know how to run audit practices, how to upskill the audit function, where the key areas are, and that's their drill. But now, as a head of internal audit, they have a much broader story, which has to do with connecting the dots of what they're seeing in an internal audit with a company strategy, with talking to partners in the business. It's a whole broad spanning across that they need to do that's going to make that much more effective.
I love it. Now let's go in the other direction. Let's talk about when we need to drill deep. So what would be a situation or organization where that would be important?
All right. Well, if I take my example of the head of internal audit, having just taken over from somebody who was not a deep expert in audit, the audit function needed to be updated. And everybody is seeing the benefit now of someone who really, truly understands this, knows it inside out, a deep expert, and can come in and update, upskill, refocus. All right. make some technology decisions, some automated decisions that are hard to do from a spanning place. So it's that back and forth. Now, if this particular person as head of audit stays drilling deeply for too long, then that team is going to say, there's no space for me here as talent. I don't have room for growth, and they'll leave. So she's got to know when to drill down and when to pop right back up again.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think in my mind of silos, right? That in organizations, oftentimes when people get so, laser focused and driven so deep in their own particular
Right.
piece of the problem, that when they start to ignore these other ones, and oftentimes not even intentionally, right? So I love that idea. And I think that's a good lesson for everyone that's watching is to remember that, I guess, no matter what we're doing, that there's an opportunity to pay attention to both drilling deeply and widely. One of the things that I do in my consulting practice is helping dealers. Ken and I both do this with a model we call flat rate billing for managed print. And Ken and I are both deep experts in different areas. So I have more of a sales and marketing background, and Ken has more of a service background. So when we're working with our clients on the model, that certainly, we dive into what we're both really deep at. But what we've also learned is that there are so many areas of the organization, if it's accounting, right? For example, if it's business development, all these other areas that may not necessarily benefit from the depth of what we have, and to surface and bring that out. So I appreciate bringing that up because we learned it the hard way, right, Ken?
We did. And it's kind of interesting because in the service management class I teach, one of the things that I work with my service managers on is to teach them to train their technicians to think of each person's territory like it's their own business, and then give them some autonomy and let them run their business, give them responsibility and authority. But you still have to watch the numbers and do some monitoring and provide help when they need it. But I think that that's one of the things that chokes off initiative in companies is too many times that you get this top-down management that is not open to the creativity of their employment. I like what Steve Jobs said you hire people that are smarter than you are and then let them do their job.
Right. Right. But you can't let them go off the rails. So,
Right.
I can't just say, go do anything you want. I kind of got to keep some guidelines, some steering marks on that one. And that's that balance between some depth, some breadth. So my core message there, absolutely, totally. And I would argue somebody who's head of sales, for example, yes, they're a specialist, let's say in service, they're specialist in that area of service. But there's still times that they need to connect to what's the commercial viability of the service that we're doing, what's the importance of this client versus other clients. How do we make that trade-off as a business to be strong as a business? And that's a breadth topic, not a depth topic.
And I'm actually on your leadership forum page right now. I'm going to bring that up and share it. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about, the services that you do offer to help folks through this, right? Obviously, reading a book is one thing. I certainly encourage everyone to do that. But obviously, they can get in touch with you and, work on some of these leadership lessons directly, right? So what exactly happens here at the leadership forum?
Well, we will use almost any medium to deliver the message and help leaders do a better job. So we'll do that in a training class. We'll do that in a webinar. We'll do that in a speaking engagement. I do a lot of coaching one-to-one, do some team development work wherever it's needed. That's where we'll deliver it, including on social media. I'm becoming a big fan that there are some standalone products that we are to be able to provide that will help people on a, as need basis. So if you check on our webpage, you'll see products and you'll see articles and you'll see a whole host of stuff up there that give you some guidance on what we think and some self-help as well.
Yeah. And I brought up, you mentioned social media. I did bring up your LinkedIn profile as well, so people can reach out to you there. And I'll make sure that I put it in here as well. Just give me one sec. And there we go. So if anyone wants to find you on LinkedIn, Wanda Wallace, public speaker, author, and podcast host. And I did bring that up as well. I did notice that you have your podcast series going. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do with this.
The podcast, Out of the Comfort Zone. So this, being an expert leader where I know everything that is going on around my team, and I could do every job of anybody in my team if I had the time, is a bit of comfort zone. We don't have to deal with imposter syndrome. We don't really have to deal with corporate politics. When it's conflict, I'm going to drill into the details in order to resolve it. It's a comfort zone. The move into a space where I don't know as much as my team, I still have to represent my team well, and I have to take some risks. I have to make some decisions without all the information, is out of the comfort zone. It's also a career maker if your aspiration is to rise in responsibility in the organization. So, how do you get out of that comfort zone and thrive is what the podcast is about.
I love it. Well, that's great. And I did put the link in there for folks to be able to find that as well. WandaWallace.com/podcast. And maybe now I can ask you a question as well. And I'm sure that it's one that some of our viewers will have. What do you think some of the key differences that you've seen, for leadership that has to be considered post-pandemic, right? So the world has changed quite a bit, continues to change. I don't think we're finished yet, maybe never. But what kind of key things have you seen that have changed for leadership?
Okay, so everybody's talking about how do I deal with hybrid work? People are in, they're not in. I mean, that is going to continue to be a challenge for how we do it. And there are plenty of folks that have talked about that one. I'll leave that aside. I want to talk about a different one, though, that I think is new, and I'm seeing a lot of leaders focus on. Never before have we talked about the emotional health and well-being of our employees the way we have to now. So you do have to start looking at whether people are burning out, and that's happening at rapid rates. So what are you doing as a leader to manage that? You have to be looking at how do you keep people at their best. You have to be looking about the emotional toll that all the change that's happening in the world as well as in the businesses is taking on people. And there's this other thing Ryan Jenkins has talked about is loneliness. Our youngest employees are incredibly lonely.
Yeah.
And you never thought you needed to talk about that as a manager, but you want the best out of your team. You better be thinking about it. How am I connecting my team? How am I managing this from the business side point of view? Those topics, no way would I have expected that I needed to spend as much time with people on stress and well-being as I am spending today.
Well, it's interesting to bring that up because the guest that we had on last week, Melissa Whitaker, she's a sales coach and someone that we know quite well. And they have also added a health and wellness section in their training. And it really resonates with me that you bring it up as well, right? In your, sort of leadership coaching. And this is something that I have seen. I mean, I do have kids that are, in their 20s now, and looking across spectrum and listening to their stories about loneliness. And it really struck me the first time they heard it when they talked about it. And I was like, how can you be lonely? You're, connected all the time, right? Either on your phones or, doing different things. But yeah, there really is that sense that we have to be aware to be able to help them, right?
Right. That's absolutely right. I mean, there's a simple explanation of this. Rob Cross and Ryan Jenkins have done some wonderful research on this one. Reference it, you go there. But here's the basic principle. We know that people are at their best handling stress, even the small add up micro stresses of the world, when they have a meaningful connection with a broader range of people. Okay. It used to be that I would have a meaningful connection with the person that I stopped in to get my coffee with in the morning, or that I went in to buy the newspaper from at the local stand, or I go into the grocery store to get orders or whatever. Today, we don't have those meaningful interactions.
Yeah.
Order my coffee, pick it up, and don't speak to anybody. I don't get my newspaper anymore. It's all electronically delivered. My groceries, I don't even talk to anybody to get my groceries. We're just missing those casual interactions, even though we are hyper connected on social media.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, right? That one of the things I do, I actually host two groups on a weekly basis. One is called the Top 100. And it's a group of influencers basically in the Office Equipment channel. We get together on a weekly basis to talk about, things that are happening in the space, right? The second group I lead is an AI awareness group because AI is so prevalent right now.
Right.
And it's amazing because people told me I was crazy. They said, are you kidding? Like another Zoom call for people, in the age of Zoom. But it has been shockingly effective at bringing people together and connecting, and the relationships that are being formed by having these conversations, right? I think that's the difference, is that in these, and you can tell me, right? But in these groups, what we do is we don't come with an agenda. It's like, let's talk about what's happening in the world. What are you seeing? let's dissect it, and as a group work together to really discuss them, right?
Right.
And I found that very powerful. So I do understand that it is nice to be able to be in the office, and sometimes when you can't, that there's those alternatives, right? So would you agree that sometimes it's a way that the actual virtual sessions are framed versus just being virtual?
I think a lot of it has to do with the way we run meetings, period, whether they're virtual or they're face-to-face or they're a hybrid. And we could really clean that up in some very significant ways and make them more productive and more meaningful. I have found through COVID and in shifting our work all online during that period that it is very possible to build meaningful connection virtually with a group of strangers or with an intact team. It takes intentionality. But let me also be clear, it doesn't work for everybody. I have a couple of clients that I coach that it just does not work virtually. I can't get their attention. I can't get them to open up. I can't get them to go deep enough. And the only choice on that one is I get on a plane or walk down the street and go have a meeting with them face to face. So like everything in life, we're individuals and we've got to adapt some for individual preferences.
Well, I appreciate that. And one other thing I want to bring up here, I'm actually going to bring up one of the things that you speak on and work with people on, which is enhancing, careers for women, right? And this is, I think, particularly in the channels that we serve in the technology sectors, that female leadership and roles are actually still shockingly low, right? So what kind of work are you doing to enhance, careers for women? Because this is so important.
It's so first off, I think one of the interesting stories for women is the sense of isolation that they feel. So they're not like everybody around them. They don't have somebody who will relate to their common experiences, common backgrounds. It's hard to have stuff that you just casually chat about that's similar to everybody else around. We would also say the same is true for people of color or for immigrants or for somebody from a totally different background working in the tech sector. So it's not just women, it's that being the minority that leaves you feeling outside. And then once you start that feeling of outside, everything else is harder. And I personally believe everything that's interesting that happens in organizations happens through conversation. And if I'm not connected, if there's not building trust, if there's not the same level of relationship happening, I just made it harder to get things done. And I made it harder for people to be comfortable with me as a boss or as a peer. And so the secret for me is, one, helping women understand how to take those out of the comfort zone moves and thrive in the process. So what does it look like when you move outside your zone of expertise and really try to lead at that level? One. And two, you're not alone. What you're experiencing is the same that everybody is experiencing as they make that move. So there's nothing unique about the imposter syndrome. For example, it's a normal human thing. And then third, we find great success in getting a small group of women in the same company connected with each other and talking about their challenges. And that connection can go for years in terms of building momentum and supporting each other and backing each other.
Yeah, and I like how you talk about this idea that diversity is deeper, obviously, than just male or female, right? That it is this minority thing. I had an interview with Professor Neil Curtis. He's an ex-military and has since moved into the corporate world, and he leads a diversity and inclusion group for both Australia and New Zealand. And one of the comments that he said that really struck me as well, which resonates with what you just said, is that the reason that we need to support a lot of these outside or smaller groups, be they women or because of other reasons, right, is because that diversity, that's the only way you can bring diversity into the office. And it's kind of selfish, he said, because once you do that, once you're aware of it, the benefits for companies just explode, right? It's not like you're doing anyone any favors. It's like the results of it are just empowering your company to grow in ways that it never could before, right?
I do, except I think we have to be careful. It's too easy to say we've gotten diversity. That's a counting exercise. I have some of different kinds of categories of people, and I have enough of different kinds of categories of people. If, though, I'm expecting each of those diverse candidates to come in and look like the majority, then I have a bad version of the majority. So we've got to create a space where people feel that it is okay to bring their unique experiences, perspectives, concerns, say them out loud, and then deal with it. And that means there is more conflict, and that means there's healthier discussion and greater debate, and that's where the win comes. The win comes from the culture that makes it possible to have meaningful discussions.
Yeah, and sorry if I was confused on that. I think that was kind of my point, was
Yeah.
that by bringing that in, that uniqueness and everything else, right? It supercharges that. I don't always call it conflict, but definitely conversation, right? That there's this idea that that with more diversity, more diverse thought, and everything else, we can think out the box more naturally, right?
If we listen to it. So my concern is that we don't listen to it. We bring it in and then we silence it, or we don't make it easy for people to talk. Okay?
Yeah, it's true, right? It's one thing to say that we're doing it, like you said, the counting part, but it's another to live it, right? And you tap on another point there. So maybe you can share with us, what advice would you have for leaders that are trying to create a culture that actually embraces diversity?
Okay. All right. I have a couple of very specific ones. And we do a whole thing on this when there's like 10 of them, but let me just give you a couple to get started on. Number one, when you're running a meeting, your direct reports, make sure everybody is speaking in that meeting every single time without exception. If they don't have anything to say, then they shouldn't be in the meeting, and you should be rethinking your organizational structure. That means you may have to create space. You may have to circle back around and say, hey, tell me what you said again. I don't think I understood it. It may mean you have to learn to pause, to let somebody who's a little quieter speak up a bit more. So it's drawing out every voice, because you're signaling to your team every opinion matters. Short of that, you're not going to get there. So that's number one. Second, one of my pet peeves is watch how you spend your informal, unstructured time. So there's very little unstructured time in most managers' days. They get up from their desk or walk out of their office, and they have a person they typically go to, or an area that they typically go to, and they chat with the group there. And it may just be really casual chat, whatever the conversation is, but you left somebody out. And you're now that makes it harder for that person to feel comfortable with you, harder for you to get to know them as a human being, harder for them to get to know each other. So monitor how you spend your informal, unstructured time and spread it evenly among your team. Okay.
Yeah, that is a natural thing that we do as well. And I think sometimes just because, as human beings, even leaders can be a little bit, I don't know if shy is the right word, but they go to what feels easy, right? Like what's familiar.
Well, and it's I don't have a lot of time, so I go to what is comfortable, and I don't want to get it wrong with somebody. So I don't know how to ask. So I don't ask, because I avoid them. I mean, I understand this from the best of intention, but it's a no-go. My third piece of advice, Wes, is you got to give feedback. I don't care how hard it is, how badly you do it. Give the feedback message, and then get someone to help that person figure out how to correct it. But if you don't give the feedback, nobody can help. And that is unfair, totally unfair.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm fortunate. One of the leaders that I work with, Mr. Joel Vaslow, if you're out there watching today, big shout out to you. We have a weekly meeting to go through just that, right? Like to go through feedback on a project and anything else. And it's specifically for that. And I love it. It helps me to get better. We come up with new ideas out of that feedback as well, right?
Yeah. But it's scary. I mean, I get it. It's scary to give feedback to somebody who's not very much like me. And there's a high cost for getting it wrong. And I get that, but no fair. You got to do it anyway.
You do. I love it. And hey, listen, in respect for your time and for that of our guests, for our audience, we are actually running down to the bottom of our half hour. So I do want to make sure, I'm just actually going to bring this up. When you go to the website, I would encourage everyone to do this, that you can actually sign up for the newsletter the first time you visit. You can put your email in there. I've already done so. And once you've done that, then you can be on the website there. And this is the best place to get in touch with you. I've also got your webpage here, wandawallace.com, for the podcast, as we talked about earlier. The LinkedIn page, I'm just going to bring that up again so people, and again, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I think it's a great place for people to connect and get together in different ways. So, Wanda, I cannot thank you enough for joining us, today on the program, and look forward to talking with you more in the future about how we can better leadership. It's such an important topic, and cannot thank you enough.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. Good conversation.
And hey, listen, for everyone else out there that has joined us today, thank you for your time. I know that it's valuable. We know that you have things to do, and hopefully this education series is benefiting you in your business life and in your personal life. And as I always say, until next time, keep learning. And we lost Ken due to a technical glitch, but as Ken likes to say every time, and I'll say it in his behalf today, keep leveling up. All right, everybody.